walked in here! I walked in here!
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Groovy.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special mini Box Office Pulp. That's right, it's all the fun of the full-size podcast, shrunk to bite-sized proportions. Today, we're taking a peek at J.J. Abrams' newest film, Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm your host, Flexo, and joining me tonight is First Officer, Mr. MB.
I do not think she can take any more, Captain.
My God, give her all she's got.
Ah!
Podcast immediately flies into the sun.
We're saved by Chekhov. It's a whole deal.
It's don't worry, it's like 3 episodes in an arc. It's weird. There's talking rock monsters. Don't think too much about it.
By the way, can I just say that when that moment actually happened in the movie, I actually cheered for the first time. I was like, yes, Chekhov saved them.
Go, Chekhov! He's wearing a red shirt, didn't even die.
Then I realized I just cheered for Chekhov. That has never happened in the history of ever with me.
Probably in the history of ever, like for anyone.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know, movie Chekhov just has that charm about him.
Yeah, it's that Yeltsin.
I mean, he was Kyle Reese, so.
It just carried over.
Yeah.
I should probably mention to anyone who's listening to this podcast, spoilers.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Never mind, Chekhov does nothing.
Doesn't do a thing, never gets off his ass. It's weird. Yeah. Scotty keeps yelling at him.
Yeah. He's like kind of the alien friend from the first movie. He's kind of filled that role.
He just blinks a lot. Heavy breathing.
Yeah.
It might have been played by Deep Roy. It's weird. Also, spoilers, John Harrison is actually Picard.
I did not see that coming because, like, you look at him and you see the hair, and you're like, well, that can never be right.
No, it's like James McAvoy in First Class. Like, he's going to lose it over the course of the film.
Ah. I didn't see that deductive reasoning because...
There were actually, like, people online who thought that was going to be the big twist.
What, really?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Like, a couple weeks before the movie came out, everyone was trying to figure out the mystery box. And the obvious answer is Khan, but people are like, no, that's too obvious. So They thought, okay, in the trailer we see the Vengeance, which is gigantic. It's pretty much the Enterprise, but better and bigger, and way too advanced for that time period. So they reasoned it out as, well, we've already seen time travel in the first Star Trek. Picard, maybe Mirrorverse Picard, comes from the future to the past and starts wrecking shit.
And he's played by Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right, well, it makes a little bit more sense than Khan, right?
Yeah, I guess it does.
Like, just imagine that, though. Picard versus Kirk, but evil Picard.
Alternate mirror universe Picard.
Like, you think that'd be a fanboy's wet dream.
It would be, and it would make a great, like, closing out to a trilogy.
They should bring him back and then have him reveal, like, I was never actually Khan. I was Picard. Now shall we begin? I mean, lasers and lens flares, and it's fucking awesome.
Awesome. Worf is there. He's mostly CGI.
I guess that goes in a bit of a tangent here, but maybe we should jump back into Darkness. To start off, how did you feel about Into Darkness? Did you love it, hate it?
It's weird. I feel like it's inferior to the first movie, but I didn't leave disappointed. Like I would say a good 90% of it I really loved, actually. Like, it's kind of a sequel to where, and I don't know if this really necessarily makes sense, but it's kind of a sequel where you go in and you're kind of taken off guard by the fact that it's different enough from the first movie, and yet it keeps those elements there. Like, it keeps those elements in the loosest sense, but still manages to do its own thing, which I liked.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because it jumps right into the movie and just keeps going. So we don't even get time to, like, renew every character. It's just like, here they are, go.
I mean, that's one thing I've kept hearing about it consistently, in that it's just kind of a relentless movie. Like, once it gets started, it never stops.
I'd actually appreciate that. I mean, pacing-wise, we've seen so many movies where they have a middle act that just sags. Whereas this one is continuous. Like, there is always something exciting happening. So while you're sitting there for that hour and 40 minutes or whatever it is, you're entertained.
I would actually argue that the first movie was kind of one of those movies that had a second act that kind of lagged.
Yeah. Well, they had a hard time, too. It's like a superhero origin where they have to go and introduce, like, 9 different principal characters.
Yeah, and they did a good job, but it was like, you could kind of tell that it bogged down. But with this one, it's like, all they have to do is just kind of give them their one moment, their one introductory moment, and then they're there.
Yeah. So
Which
did you feel they gave the characters enough to do, or did some get a little shortchanged?
a couple of them I think got shortchanged. Uhura I didn't feel like got much of anything to do. Like there was that scene where she's speaking Klingon to the actual Klingons whenever they're forced to land,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of the closest she had to a standout moment, and I felt like they could have done like a little bit more with her.
Yeah, that scene bummed me out because it seemed like they were giving her a really important role, and then they went with, nah, fuck it, we're just gonna have everyone shoot it out.
Yeah, and I don't know, like even though Peter Weller's character did have a pretty integral part in the actual plot of it, I felt like he wasn't seen enough in the movie. Like he kind of got like one short scene at the beginning, and then another short scene after that, and then they're off on their adventure, and then he shows up like in the third act, and it's like, oh, I forget he was in this.
Yeah, it would have been really nice if they could have incorporated his character into the first Star Trek. Somehow, I mean, obviously it's too late now, but
Yeah,
just to have that continuity between movies where we feel like we know this guy a little bit more.
but no, they had to have Tyler Perry.
Yeah, see? They could have made Tyler Perry the ultimate bad guy. And at least you would have been like, oh, well, I know this guy from before. What happened?
God, Medea shows up on the on the destroyer,
All types and kinds.
and then it would have been satisfying because Khan would have killed him.
Can you imagine what kind of stunts Medea would pull off in 3D? I don't want to
Back
think about it.
backflips and
Actual stunts. Just acrobatics. It's impressive. Tyler Perry is very limber for a man of his size.
like Medea is actually floating through space in that scene where they're trying to get from ship to ship.
She's the debris.
Yeah, she actually like passes by Kirk and Khan to the Enterprise. That was the ultimate plan.
There's gonna be so many weird deleted scenes on this Blu-ray.
Yeah. Speaking of deleted scenes, like apparently there's a scene of Khan just showering menacingly.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that wasn't deleted. That was just the marketing that they just didn't have the balls to pull off. Could you imagine that was actually the marketing? Like 30 seconds of just Khan in the shower staring at the viewer, sudsing himself.
Then there's one shot of Alice Eve in her underwear.
Just to balance things out.
Yeah. But, okay, going back to the original point, I did feel like Dr. Carol Marcus could have been used a lot more, because I did enjoy her inclusion.
Yeah.
I appreciated that they didn't go the cliche route of having her and Kirk into a thing, even though that kind of... Yeah, I mean, I figured that's, being hinted at, because obviously this takes a lot of cues from Wrath of Khan, and she's a big part of that, but...
Right.
I felt like within the movie itself, she was kind of inconsequential.
Yeah, I feel like of all the characters, she's really the one with the least to do. Like, they gave a decent shot to everyone else. Chekhov gets his moment where he gets to put on the red shirt and take over Scotty's role. Scotty saves the day a couple of times. Bones is there doing his stuff. Pretty much everyone gets a moment or has some sort of lesson they learn or an arc. Yeah, she's just kind of there.
Yeah, pretty much. And also, like, granted, I feel like it works just because of the fact that it was early on and it was kind of a shock when it happened because you genuinely didn't expect it to happen when it did. But Bruce Greenwood, I mean, him as Captain Pike he was good in the time that he was used, but maybe that's the reason I actually felt like he could have been used more, just because he was so good.
Well, it's going to be, we know J.J. Abrams isn't going to be doing 3 just for the fact that Bruce Greenwood, he can't make another cameo. Unless they do like a flashback. Then, like in all of Abrams' other films, there's been Greenwood, so without him, hopeless.
Well, I mean, he could show up as Batman.
I think they probably rewrote the script just like, okay, Abrams is going to be doing Star Wars after this. We're going to have to kill off Greenwood.
Just to make sure.
Lindelof is just kind of sighing in the corner like, alright, if I have to.
He's still drinking from his years on Lost.
Why is the internet so mean?
But, I mean, how did you feel as far as the characters go?
It was weird because I got done with the movie, and normally when I watch a film, I'm doing this horrible thing where I'm sitting there judging it the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I probably should spend the first time I watch a movie just enjoying it, and then go back and reflect on what I liked and didn't like. And I kind of do it the opposite way, where I watch a film and kind of critique it, and then go back and enjoy it the second time.
Yeah, I mean, for certain films, I do one or the other.
Yeah.
Usually.
But for this one, I was sitting there, and like halfway through, I kind of caught myself sitting there like, well, that's dumb. Why doesn't teleporter work? And I thought, well, that's stupid. Why am I sitting there doing that when I could just be watching the film? And from that point on, like the halfway point, I really started to enjoy the movie after that. And by the time I was done, I was like, man, that was great. I got to see pretty much everything I wanted. And it felt like everyone else in the theater was a little disappointed, which was really odd.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really explain why they were. I guess it just because it wasn't as good as the first movie, but like people have said, it's like the first Star Trek set such a high bar, and it was such an unexpected hit. If not financially, I don't know how much the first film made, but I know it was at least commercially successful as long as you weren't a Trekkie.
Yeah, it was, financially, I want to say something like 400 worldwide, but on like a 200 million budget, or obviously a little south of that. But it's moderately successful, better than they were expecting, I imagine.
Yeah. So, I mean, it set a bar that was pretty high to meet. And, I mean, granted, a lot of sequels do. I mean, a lot of big franchise sequels tend to, usually of this genre specifically, they tend to outshine or outclass the original film and be even better. But you do occasionally get those films where it's like, it's not as good, but it's still good. So.
I feel like Joss Whedon actually made a really good point when he's talking about working on Avengers 2. When he first started his outline, he said, okay, I don't know if I can go bigger than the Avengers, and it might not be a good idea to go bigger than destroying like all of New York. So maybe I have to go into these characters and make it more personal on those guys. And I feel like that's something that could be applied to Star Trek. Because in the first film, it's all about these characters. We blow up Vulcan. Second film, well, what do? We have to have constant action. We have to bring back the biggest villain in our film franchise. And it feels like there's a lot of action and a lot of stuff keeping you running, but maybe not as much meat to dig into.
Yeah, and also what's strange about it is that the film actually takes place in about 3 locations when you think about it. Like 3 primary locations. Like a good chunk of the movie actually takes place just outside of Earth and just outside of the Klingon home planet.
Mm-hmm. And
that
first planet, Naribi, or whatever it's actually called.
Yeah, that was actually a really good scene. But it does a lot with very little, which the first film was so ambitious to where it did so much at a time that it's actually kind of a nice change of pace to see something simplified, but at the same time made into such a character piece. Because this really is a film that's Kirk's story. And even though the first film, to an extent, was Kirk's story as well, it was more of a story that was really all of the crew, because they were coming together for the first time.
Well, one thing I actually really enjoy about the rebooted Star Trek is the fact that, while Kirk is still the captain and primarily the focus, you could easily look at the movies as being all about Spock. Like, Spock could easily be the main character.
Yeah, that is true.
Like, he's got a complete arc to rival Kirk's in both films, and hell, in this one, he's actually around for the conclusion, whereas Kirk has to sit it out.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty surprising turn of events.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially when you consider that, it's action Spock.
Yeah, angry action Spock. He even gets a Vulcan nerve pinch in.
Like he's at the end of the film, he's actually like beating Khan down. He's on the verge of killing him. So,
yeah, he would have too if he didn't need his blood.
Yeah.
Which I say he could have just punched the blood right out of him.
Oh, yeah. Though that is kind of odd in that they had that whole scene where Kirk is punching him for killing Captain Pike, and it doesn't really do anything to him. But at the end of the day, Vulcan punch is apparently like twice as strong.
Vulcans are actually much stronger than humans.
Oh, really?
To be a sci-fi nerd, as a matter of fact. Yes, Vulcans are very, very strong. Luckily, their logic compels them not to use their strength to murder everyone around them.
Except when you bring up their mothers.
Yeah.
Then they go ballistic.
All bets are off. Or you kill their best friend with radiation poisoning.
Yeah, that too. But that's actually a good way to segue into this question, which is, what is your prior history with Star Trek?
Well, for me, I actually got into Star Trek because of the first film. Like, I saw that and eventually went back and saw all the other ones. And by all the other ones, I mean, I've seen the first season of the original series, a little bit of Next Generation, and all 10 films. So I would say medium, middle of the road Trekkie, not hardcore enough to really call myself an expert.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about yourself? Did you grow up as a Trekkie, or were you more of a Star Wars kind of kid?
I was definitely a Star Wars kid. To be honest, I had less than zero interest in Star Trek before the movie came out.
Yeah, same here.
I think it's had that effect on a lot of people, actually, where it's like, it's kind of this unsung gem that people really never paid attention to until this came out. Even though it is like a major sci-fi franchise, it's just kind of something that you either have the taste for it or you don't. And this kind of presented an opposite side of the argument where it's like, well, if you present it in this way, which is more like this thing that you're more familiar with, then maybe it can be cool. Which I think was the strength of the first film, is that it was very much a Star Wars type of approach to Star Trek. And on that note, I really enjoyed the first film, so I went back and I watched a little bit of the original series. I haven't seen any of Next Generation or any of the other shows. I've only seen Wrath of Khan as far as the other movies.
Okay.
So
in your mind, Spock's still dead.
he will always be dead. But
even when he appears in the new ones, it doesn't make any sense. What's going on with this continuity?
Time travel. That's
yeah, we'll leave it at that. And he got old.
yeah, pretty much. But to be honest, I've gotten more and more curious as time has gone on, and I'm really actually jonesing to go back and try out the Next Generation, because I remember when I was growing up, my dad was a huge Star Trek guy, and he would watch the Next Generation all the time. So I was introduced to Star Trek through that, but it was really when the first Abrams film came out that I was paying attention to it on this level.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. I mean, as a kid, I was one of those people that would rent out Star Wars on VHS like every other week from the rental place, so no one else could watch it. Whereas Star Trek, if it was on TV, maybe I'd watch it just out of curiosity, but I never got into it until Abrams. And of course, the irony there is Abrams doesn't really care for Star Trek all that much. He was more of a Star Wars guy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really what makes it perfect for guys like us, because it gives it an outsider's perspective that it treats it with respect and reverence, but at the same time it makes it kind of have a different tone, which is what I think was a big factor in what the original show and the other shows and the other movies kind of were inaccessible for, which was they had a certain tone about them that was not like the fever pitch of Star Wars, or the action packed thrill that was Star Wars, whereas like Star Trek is really more of a thinking man's franchise.
Well, I definitely feel like Abrams' involvement and his direction with it is why these films can be considered good, but not good Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually what I really appreciated about Into Darkness, was that by the end of the film, it definitively says this is an alternate continuity. This is, I mean, if you, like, taking into comic book terms, this is like the Elseworlds or the What If Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I love how they set it up, because you can still have all the original stories. This doesn't destroy those in continuity or anything like that. This is a spin-off.
Yeah.
But you can still go in a completely different direction. And to be fair, Into Darkness does touch on some of the keystones of the original series, but it gets away from them a little bit and kind of mixes in that Star Wars ideology.
Yeah, and it also, like, there's one scene that is a direct introversion of a scene in the old continuity that was really the point where it established itself, I think, fully as its own thing, more so than anything in the first film or anything leading up to that in the second, which is, it's basically the scene at the end of Wrath of Khan where Spock dies, but it's flipped on its head where Kirk is the one that's dying.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this nice mirror image type of thing that I respected out of that scene. Though I did have issues with that scene that I'll probably get into when we talk about those.
Yeah. Like, I actually appreciate kind of switching it up, even though Kirk's not going to stay dead for the next one, even though they bring him back very shortly with a very obvious ploy that they set up, kind of clunky. But it's still interesting. It works. I like the idea that they're branching off and saying, we're going to do our own thing. It's going to be inspired by the old stuff, but it won't be the old stuff.
Yeah.
So I appreciated them bringing Khan, actually. Altogether, I think he was a great choice for a villain, although it kind of sets him in a lose-lose situation, because you can't compare yourself to Montalban.
No, you can't. And really, I'm glad that they didn't really even attempt that, because he doesn't look anything like Khan. He
No.
doesn't really. He doesn't even really act anything like Ricardo Montalban's Khan. Like, he's very much more reserved, and I don't think this is necessarily a choice as far as the period, but it's more of a. I think it was more of a intentional thing where they made him more of a strategist than an all-out vengeance-seeking megalomaniac almost.
Like, watching the Wrath of Khan, or even Space Seed, you watch it and Khan seems like it could be charming, but you realize, this guy's pretty much nuts. He's a ruthless monster. Whereas in this one, there are moments where you feel kind of sympathetic, actually, for Khan, and you really don't want to see him get taken down, necessarily. Like, he's the lesser of two evils compared to Peter Weller's bad guy.
Yeah, Dr. Marcus.
There we go, yeah.
I don't know if he's Dr. Marcus or Captain. I think he's Captain Marcus.
We'll go with Captain. Doctor would be his daughter.
Yeah. But I think what the big strength of this version of Khan is that he's more of a strong, silent character. Like, he's constantly really kind of planning his next move. And you can see that even from the time that he's captured on board the Enterprise, that he's got something more going on, but you could almost buy that he is legitimately out to help Kirk and the rest of the crew just for his own means. Which,
if you didn't have the scene of Spock Prime basically telling them that Khan is evil and wants to destroy everyone else in the galaxy, you would not assume he's that bad of a dude.
Yeah. And even then, it's like you could have easily still had it be that he was still a good guy.
Yeah, in this universe, he could have just been misunderstood.
Yeah. Though,
but they do give us like some pretty savage parts where he breaks Carol Marcus's leg by stomping on her and beats everyone else nearly to death.
Yeah, and it literally crushes Peter Weller's head in with his palms, which is...
bare hands.
Yeah.
Also murders an entire squadron of Klingons pretty much single-handedly.
Oh, that scene was amazing. Just seeing... I mean, you know it's him from the moment you see him, but like just seeing him with his face covered and just going all vigilante on them.
Like he's holding like a gigantic artillery piece that shouldn't be a gun, but he's using it like a gun.
It's like a giant laser cannon.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. But
I do wish they had not included the scene of Khan behind the glass, just for the fact that that's becoming such a villain cliche right now.
Yeah, that is true. At the same time, it's like I don't know what else they could have done. I mean, I guess they could have interrogated him on the Klingon homeworld.
Yeah, like I feel like there are better ways around it.
Yeah,
but it gets it done, I suppose.
I am Khan.
And everyone's a non-reaction to that.
Yeah, that was kind of a weird. It was kind of a weird. I don't want to say result. It's more of a unfortunate kind of timing aspect of it.
It was like they were talking directly to the audience, like, "Hey guys, it's Khan." But at that point, I think everyone had already suspected it or had that surprise ruined for them.
Here's an interesting question. Before you realized for sure that it was Khan, did you have any other theories?
I read the Picard theory, and I'm like, that's just crazy enough to possibly work, although I doubt it would ever happen. But for a long time, I thought, well, it's just John Harrison. Like, he's actually not going to be anyone but John Harrison.
Yeah, I did. Admittedly, I did think that for the longest time, probably the longest of any theory. But I did have a long-standing theory that he was actually the villain from the first episode of the original series, which is Gary Mitchell.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the dude.
A lot of people
talked
about that. It makes sense with the superpowers.
Yeah, with a dude with that is essentially endued with the powers of a god, where he can remake the universe. Like, I even thought that was what the poster was referencing, where he's standing and he's made a hole in the wall in the shape of the insignia.
Yeah, that would have been really interesting. And when they first said Gary Mitchell, I was like, oh, that could be awesome. But
yeah, that could have been. But to be honest, I'm not disappointed with the fact that he's Khan. Like, I do agree that it was probably a little too obvious, but at the same time, it's like...
Well, it doesn't help because Abrams does a mystery box, which is trying to preserve the secrecy of the film, which just pisses everyone else on the internet off, so they try their hardest to crack it.
Yeah.
So when they get to the movie, they've done the opposite of what he wanted. Like, if you'd gone into Star Trek Into Darkness with no idea what was happening, I have a feeling you would have appreciated a lot more if you didn't even know that Khan was on the table, or the villain's name was in question.
Though, to be honest, like, up until I actually had it spoiled directly by a website, I was still a little skeptical that they would actually do Khan. Like, it just seemed like something... Like, I think even I subscribe to the idea that, oh, it's too obvious for them to go with Khan. Maybe they'll change it up.
Well, some of the early casting rumors, like they originally were looking at Benicio del Toro, made it seem like Khan was a pretty big possibility.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I saw that, I pretty much suspected it would be Khan, and then it didn't. And oddly enough, I think I kind of forgot about that when they cast Benedict Cumberbatch.
Well, they denied it was Khan a bunch of times, so that probably helped them a little bit.
Yeah.
So I feel like the mystery box is a cool thing, but the fact that the internet has to ruin it, it just draws in more attention than it's worth. So it might drum up some publicity, but it would have just been better for me as a viewer if I had no idea that they had cast Cumberbatch as anyone other than just some random schmo who wants to destroy the Enterprise.
Or even really build up sort of a diversion villain. Like,
I don't want to get into Iron Man 3 territory for too long.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the Mandarin twist going... Oh, shit. Spoilers for Iron Man 3. I didn't know the Mandarin twist going in. So it was actually like, holy shit, they actually pulled that off? And finding out the Mandarin was not the main villain. I mean, even though I didn't care for Aldrich
Killian.
Guy Pearce.
Yeah.
I didn't care for Guy Pearce as the villain as much. It was still just such a blindside to me. It was awesome. I actually enjoyed sitting in theaters and have that switch happen just because I really wasn't expecting it.
I think maybe I would have appreciated it more if that happened. Like, that would have been a genuine shock. And I do believe that cinema is really best preserved for the screen. Like if you read too many spoilers, even though when it comes to superhero films, I tend to do that anyway, just because I kind of have this whole thing where, I don't know, I feel like I need to know. But even though it screws me over at the end of the day, I don't really care because I'm going to see it anyway.
That's definitely true.
But I do feel like cinema is something that the more surprises, the better.
Yeah. I don't know. When I was sitting in theaters and Khan asked how many missiles there were, and that gave away that it was Khan, that right there was really exciting, even though I pretty much knew it was Khan. So I imagine, if that reveal had actually worked, it would have really elevated the movie. But to a general audience member, it doesn't mean jack shit.
Yeah, because really they don't even know the character of Khan to begin with.
Yeah.
Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan it came out in I think it was the early 80s?
Yeah, it was pretty early 80s.
And, really he hasn't shown up since. Like, of course you've got the pop culture references of Shatner yelling Khan, but
that
like
doesn't tell you anything about the character.
Yeah, beyond that, it's like it doesn't really establish that he's this big Star Trek villain.
Mm-hmm. So do you think they did enough with Khan to kind of impress a new generation of people? Like, does this seem like he's a villain capable of matching the Joker or even Bane or Antoine Chigurh or any other big villains from the last few years?
Kinda yes and kinda no, and I think the big reason I'm leaning towards kinda yes is mostly because of Cumberbatch's performance. Like, I think...
voice. Oh, he could read a dictionary. It'd be the most sinister dictionary reading I've ever heard.
Yeah, he really does play a great villain, and I had been introduced to Cumberbatch through the BBC Sherlock series, which he's great in.
Mm-hmm. That show is fantastic all around.
Yeah, but when he puts his mind to a villain mindset, it's like there's like a perfect match there for some reason. Like, I can't say for sure whether or not it will have a lasting impact because this film's still in theaters as we speak, but
I feel like he was definitely a step up from Nero. Like, I felt for him more. They gave him a little bit more of a backstory.
Yeah, he was better than Nero. Though I still liked Nero mostly just because of Eric Bana's performance, because he was clearly having a lot of fun with that.
Oh yeah, he definitely... Bana always seems like he gives it his all when he's in a film.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for Cumberbatch in this one. Like, he really tries to sell every line he has. And there's some parts, like when he's taking out the Klingons, where you believe he's a huge threat, or when he's stomping on people on the Vengeance, like, oh, shit, don't mess with that guy. But they don't give him quite enough stuff to do where you always feel that he's a huge threat.
Yeah, that is true. Like, he's kind of downplayed, I think, in the second act, because he spends most of his time in captivity on the Enterprise. and it mostly has to do with the unraveling of the motivation of Peter Weller's character and the mystery of what's actually inside the missiles.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it seems like a fanfic's like wet dream to have Khan and Kirk team up for a while to be buddy-buddy. I'm not sure if that serves as Khan as a villain, but it does make him a more interesting character where you get to see him team up.
Well, I would argue that maybe it makes him a little bit more accessible than your standard villain, because like you really are in question for a lot of it whether or not he's going to turn around and betray Kirk.
Yeah, like when he saves Kirk from hitting the debris and flying off into space, looking back, there's no real reason for him to do it.
Yeah.
Like, you could have just let him go. He obviously can infiltrate the ship by himself. He does not need any help.
And what's funny is that you can almost argue that maybe Khan didn't even intend to do it at all, because you play out the scene when they reach the bridge of what is it? The Vengeance?
The Vengeance.
Yeah. When they reach the bridge of that ship, then Kirk turns around and has Scotty zap him with a blast, and then he falls to the ground, and it's like, if you didn't do that...
Yeah, if you didn't poke the bee's nest, everything might have gone okay. I really do feel like they kind of brought it on themselves.
Yeah, and again, it's like that scene where Spock Prime is warning them, he was the worst enemy the Enterprise has ever faced. It's like, this is an alternate universe, right?
Yeah, and they don't even cover the fact that, Khan was responsible for, like, the eugenics war or anything like that wiped out a majority of Earth at one point. So without that background, you really don't see Khan as, like, the worst dude in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, he has a very sufficient motivation in this movie.
Yeah, so I would actually love it if they brought Khan back for Star Trek 3.
Yeah, definitely, because it leaves it very open-ended.
Yeah, I would love it if they did like a Loki thing where they just kind of bring him back as one of the regular characters or something.
And it would be so easy to do, because really all you have to do is have the Enterprise malfunction, and he's awake again.
Well, they show him getting put into storage somewhere.
Oh, I thought that was Yeah, you're right. Actually, for some reason I was thinking that was aboard the Enterprise, but
yeah, I think it's kind of like the Star Trek version of that room from Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Top man.
Exactly.
But going on to the performances and like the other performances besides Cumberbatch, what did you think of the cast this time?
Oh, like I said, everyone gets a moment to shine. Sometimes you kind of wish they had a little bit more to do.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they let Sulu actually be captain of the ship for a while. Like, that was a cool little moment with him. Chekhov I feel like Chekhov gets the shortest end of the stick here. Most of the time it's just him running around like, I'll try to fix it.
Yeah, that's true.
Scotty gets an expanded role. That was kind of cool. They don't quite give Bones quite enough to do, but Carl Urban's so good he makes use of whatever little screen time he has.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about Bones too. It's like, you could say that he was shortchanged, but I think that's also the argument of there just not being enough Carl Urban in the movie.
Yeah, man, that goes with those things. Even Drake, they could have got like another Drake clone or something just to make it even better.
Yeah, it could have been like 4 hours long. Now you're imagining a 4 hour long version of Dredd, aren't you?
I am. And it wouldn't even just be the slow-mo stretching it out to 4 hours. It'd be new footage.
Yeah.
Everyone at home, forget about that. Don't dream of such things.
Yeah, Armand Desante is actually in that movie. But I was really impressed with Chris Pine this time around. Like, and I wasn't unimpressed with him in the first movie at all. It's just that I felt like he was given a lot more to do as far as range.
Well, he's got a really tricky job in this one, where he has to be the arrogant dick that puts his whole crew at risk, but you still have to like him as a character. You want to be behind this guy.
Yeah.
So it's damn hard to do. I wouldn't want to take on that role.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that Kirk, even though he is arrogant, like, you can tell where he's coming from in this movie. Like, it's not that he's just being brash because he's inexperienced. He's literally doing what he feels is right.
Right, like, he's got the skills to back up a lot of these kind of things.
Yeah, and that scene where he's arguing with Captain Pike in the beginning about saving Spock from the volcano, it's like, you totally side with Kirk there, because, like, if he hadn't have done what he did, then Spock would have easily died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's another kind of thankless role is, for the majority of the film, Quinto has to play Spock as traditional Spock, where he's emotionless and he's, down with the Vulcan way. And how hard would that be, where you have to play a role and make it kind of robotic, but still interesting to the audience?
Yeah, that's true. I think a big part of that is just kind of bouncing off the other actors. I think that's really all you kind of can do.
Yeah,
with
the
a role
cast
like
does
that.
have great chemistry. Like, everyone clicks together very well.
Yeah. And Spock was given a lot to do, but at the same time, I kind of felt like his role was minimalized in this one to an extent. Though he still has a very, very great arc in it that really kind of is the centerpiece of the film. So it's really hard to complain about that.
Yeah. Actually, I don't remember what we last said to get into this, so segue. I guess if I were going to recommend this film to people, you always hate saying, well, it's a movie with a lot of kind of dumb spots to it, but great action, great characters. But I feel like that applies here. Like, the teleporter breaks plots, so you gotta find ways around that or just ignore its capabilities.
Yeah.
And just appreciate the action and characters as they're happening, and try not to think too hard about some of the plot details.
Yeah, because really, that was a big part of the first film, too. It's like you started to think about the whole time travel thing. It's like it's convoluted as all hell.
Yeah, and that especially had some problems with it because they cut out a big chunk with the Klingons taking Nero hostage for years at a time.
Yeah.
So that one kind of had some editing issues. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the same deal with Into Darkness, but I think it's just the technology actually makes it very tricky to operate. It's kind of like in every horror film, they always have to have a scene where somehow cell phones are disabled because they just break the plot.
Yeah, that is true.
But I guess... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And plus, like, the whole thing with the generator inside the Enterprise, which has to force Kirk to go in. Like, for some reason, that scene where he's trying to turn it back on, that didn't really click for me entirely. I don't know why. Like, it was a cool moment in theory, but in practice, it was just kind of like he's kicking something. He's kicking what is essentially a motor.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I didn't really have any issues with that, but I could see how someone else might not get into it so much.
Yeah.
You think it'd be more like hazmat suits sitting around outside or something.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I would definitely echo your sentiments about it. Like, definitely enjoy it as it is, which is a really relentlessly paced action movie, which is, I love that. Like, I love relentlessly paced action movies if they're done right.
I want to say this is like the best pacing. Like, I enjoyed Iron Man 3, but I can still agree that there were big chunks where maybe the pacing isn't the strongest.
Yeah. Basically everything in, like, the small town.
Yeah.
Up until the extremists.
Yeah.
Soldiers. Well, once again, we're getting into spoiler territory for Iron Man 3.
Spoilers. But for Star Trek, I mean, it is, I don't want to say relentless, but it does always have a push to it. It has a drive. And so this is a perfect movie to just throw on the TV if you want something to entertain yourself for 2 hours.
And it never bogs you down or anything. Like, it's not a negative connotation to say that it never lets up. It's like, it's perfectly adjusted, I think.
And they still have things like character themes and arcs and all that going on in the background, which is really nice. It's not like action just for action's sake all of the time. There's still more meat that you can find if you were to kind of sit there and digest for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a dumb action movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's just like some things kind of get undone if you think about them too long.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like in Jurassic Park with the T-Rex crossing over the moat that appears and disappears.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, just don't think about it. It's fine.
Yeah. Like you can even think about like stuff in the Avengers and like in all like all the big comic book sci-fi movies. Like if you think about it too much, there's elements that could either break the movie or you just ignore them and you enjoy them all the more.
Yeah. So I guess if someone who hasn't seen Star Trek is listening to this, 1, shame on you for getting spoilers. 2, there are actually a lot of good qualities I would have to recommend in the film. One thing I feel like not enough people are talking about is the score by Michael, and we can butcher his last name, Giacchino. He's done all the other stuff with J.J. Abrams, like Lost and the first Star Trek. Up,
Yeah, Mission Impossible.
Super 8. All of his scores are just absolutely fantastic. This one included.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
scenes with London and his piano score are just absolutely amazing. So the score, the thing sounds beautiful. Plus, we get a scene with Kirk listening to the Beastie Boys in a threesome.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I love that callback because in the first film, you had him racing around as a kid while
Sabotage.
Yeah.
Which is even better because when you think about it, this film's way in the future, so it's like he's listening to classical music while doing this. This is like extreme oldies.
It's like he's listening to a primitive version of like Beethoven or something like that for this.
It'd probably be really classy to have Beastie Boys playing on your radio. So I love that kind of stuff. I thought that was great. There are a lot of references to older Star Treks, so if you are a Trekkie, there's a lot of great stuff to actually kind of catch.
Yeah, and actually I would argue that even if you're not really a Trekkie, like none of it confuses anyone.
No, it doesn't really. I don't think it gets in the way of the film. They're more like Easter eggs.
Yeah. I definitely agree that the film has a lot of really great elements, and I think while I did say that I don't think it's as good as the first one, it's just barely not as good as the first one, in my opinion.
And one thing I did like that they got back to is when you think Star Trek, the whole show, the original series was based on the 5-year mission about exploring the universe, being progressive, maybe playing some diplomacy type politics stuff, and hard sci-fi. And we get some of that in this film, or at least a return to some of that. The central conflict is that idea of exploration versus militarization, which feels...
it's definitely like more of a political plot than the first one.
And it ties in a little bit closer to what you'd expect from a Star Trek film. Even if that's kind of minimized to make room for more action, it's still there if you look into it, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. Again, the score, the actors all do a great job. You get to watch Cumberbatch. And those of you sitting at home, just say Cumberbatch 5 times. Just let it roll in your mouth. It's like a fine whiskey.
And he may or may not appear, so just be ready.
Don't look in a mirror. Don't look in a mirror when you do it.
Because he can smash your head in with his palms.
Yep. You hit him with stun? Yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Do not mess with the Cumberbatch.
I mean, he can fly through space in free fall.
Don't care.
Yeah.
Cumberbatch don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Cumberbatch.
Hard to say. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to find ways to include in my normal life. Like, he Cumberbatched all over.
Yeah. There's Cumberbatchery afoot.
Oh, God. No. You might as well kill yourself now.
I did love, like, all the little scenes of him just looking menacingly. Like, whenever they're on...
He's the master of the menacing stare.
Yeah, that was a big part of what made this version of Khan really have something in common with the old version of Khan, in that you look at him and there's something about that quality to him that's inherently disturbing, almost. Like, it's not really outright said or anything, but it's like, you look at him and, I don't know, a chill goes down your spine for some reason.
There's something insidious just boiling underneath the surface. You can tell when he gives you those beady stares.
Yeah. And then he opens his mouth and it's like a voice from another planet.
It's so rich and sophisticated.
I know.
So yeah, if you are on the fence about Star Trek, I know there's a lot of other stuff in theaters, a lot of stuff coming out soon. I would say give it a shot. It's especially cool in 3D. I don't know if you saw it in 3D.
I did not. I saw it in 2D.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, even though it was a post-converted film, like every time the Enterprise took off, the vapor trails were in 3D. That was pretty interesting. There was just a lot of actually pretty decent use of 3D. I was surprised.
Huh.
So there you have it. Box Office Pulp recommends Star Trek Into Darkness.
And Box Office Pulp also recommends Cumberbatch.
Oh, yeah. You can't go wrong with some fine Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch all up in here.
This is like prime Cumberbatch season. Like, if you can go down the fields and pick some.
Cumberbatch is a way of life, really.
It sucks, because now we're going to have to wait until The Hobbit before we get more Cumberbatch.
Then we're going to get Dragon Cumberbatch.
Dragon Cumberbatch. Possibly the best Cumberbatch? Who knows?
Well, unless they create like a Smurf Cumberbatch.
What if they had Khan riding Dragon Cumberbatch?
Well, that would just flat out be unstoppable.
I mean, the dwarves would just give up at that point.
Yeah, I mean, both Middle Earth and the distant future would collapse simultaneously.
And regular Earth in between.
Yeah.
Just game over, man. Game over.
Crisis on multiple Cumberbatches.
One of us really needs to develop a good Cumberbatch impression.
You think you're safe? Nah, I can't.
It's tough to do on demand, yeah.
Yeah. You really have to think about it.
Yeah. No, that's terrible. No, don't try Cumberbatching at home, kids.
Only leave Cumberbatching to the professionals.
Only professional British people should even attempt to Cumberbatch. Alrighty, I think we're going to call that wraps, folks, before we talk about Cumberbatch for another 3 days. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you may also enjoy our parent podcast, Pulp Nightmare, hosted by our very own MB.
And Mike.
And that other guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about him much.
No.
Though there is another co-host that we have that does another podcast called Below the Bible Belt.
Which is fantastic. Not about Star Trek in any way that I'm aware of. We should check it out.
Southern Star Trek.
They're just in a tractor.
Full speed ahead, Scotty.
This corn pone thing ain't moving a hair's lick. I don't think any of that made sense. I'm gonna have like Southern people writing me letters like that didn't make any sense there, boy.
If you would like to send your letters to Box Office Pulp, send them at P.O. Box number...
New York.
Yep.
Anyways, you can find more of this...
18678.
You can find more of this podcast at boxofficepulp.blogspot, and you can subscribe to us on iTunes or leave us a comment on our Facebook page, or complaint if you happen to be from the South.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've offended you. Anyways...
Or if you're a Cumberbatch.
Yeah, Cumberbatch personally writes angry letters.
That's the scariest thing ever.
He attaches a picture of himself staring at you. Oh God, what have I done?
The universe comes undone.
Oh God. Anyways, thanks for listening. Live long and prosper.
And like that,